Hey, it's a little bit less blurry of a Monday. I assume eventually. Ah, there we go. Heck yeah. All right. Nice to see you guys. Hey, Annie. Happy Monday. Let's find a comfy seat. I think seat sounds like the appropriate place for us. And just settle in. Let your spine get tall, breath get fluid. If it feels advantageous, let your eyes close. Feel into both the inhale and the exhale halves of your breath. Really see if you can explore the physicality of your body with each cycle of breath. Really feel into the vibrancy of the inhale, filling and inflating your lungs. How that nourishment is drawn in. And then feel that dispersal of nourishment throughout the entirety of the body as you exhale. And let's give ourselves just about 50-ish more seconds here just to really settle into what we have for the beginning of practice. This opportunity to ground and center. And then as it feels appropriate for you, eyes can softly blink open. Let's take a kind of awareness across the sternum and let the hands come and anchor down somewhere, just so that you can have palms down, nice anchoring, and turn our gaze over towards the left. And as you're doing that, keeping that pressure down so that there is some activation across kind of the pec major, pec minor tissue. And then we'll relax the head back to neutral and just let your body settle. And then let's do the same thing to the second side. So turning to the right, that pressure down into the hands so that we feel big activation in that upper torso musculature. And then let's come back to neutral. Drop the chin to the sternum. As the chin drops here, just give a little bit of opportunity for some lateral exploration. So just moving the neck. If you're in class yesterday, if you're able to make class yesterday, kind of a nice way to follow up on what we did in the cervical spine. And if you weren't, great opportunity to move the neck. And then we'll bring our head back to neutral, lift our chin to neutral, and let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. So we're finding our way into that base position. In that base position, let's splay the fingers out nice and wide. And then almost like you're pressing and lifting into the torso just so that you get a little bit of shoulder activation before you curl your toes underneath you. And then with the toes curled underneath you, exhale out round the middle of the back. So we get this big, full flexion into the spine. And then keeping the toes curled underneath you, let's drop the belly, lift the chin. Reversing to the exhale, middle of the back arches, chin tucks. And then inhale, belly drops, chin lifts, tailbone also lifts. One more time, we'll exhale out. Get that big arch, feel the activation across the shoulders. And then inhale and drop the belly, lift the chin, lift the tailbone. And then we'll come back to neutral and let's curl our toes or keep our toes curled and lift our seat, roll our way back into down dog. Pressurize back through our down dog shape, get that expansion of the torso. And then we'll come down to hands and knees, tabletop, flip the tops of the feet and sink back into child's pose. Landing in child's pose and reconnecting with our breath, really feeling that nourishment of the inhale, the dissipation, the release of that nourishment, the integration of that nourishment on the exhale. And then see if you can get a little relax across that shoulder musculature. We've been so shoulder heavy early on. Let's see if we can get that to just chill out a little bit. And then when you're ready, let's inhale, pull ourselves forward to hands and knees, tabletop. From hands and knees, tabletop. Drop the elbows down just underneath the shoulders. So we find kind of a half tabletop, half dolphin shape, and then palms roll down. Keep the palms actively pressing into the mat. Keep those fingertips actively pressing into the mat and just start to rock back more towards a child's pose like shape. Not dropping the head though, keeping the cervical spine neutral and really trying to load up the lateral edge of the shoulders, kind of anterior / lateral edge of the shoulders. At the same time, we're elongating back into the low back. And then let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. We'll curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back and into down dog. And let's just walk our way forward to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let your body relax back into this fold, settle all the way back into this fold, and think about how much depth you can create from the hips to the top of the head. And then with the idea of kind of maintaining the depth, but slowly unwinding that depth, let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. So we're trying to keep the fold for as long as is possible. Really keeping the chin tucked and really slowly working our way up here until eventually we find that mountain pose. And in mountain, good strong glute engagement, good strong core engagement. Let's bring our hands together at heart center and just set the shoulders to be both stable, but also think about the width here. So, of course, I can't show anything because this is just too dark a shirt. But imagine that we're just pulling those scapula back without bowing the tummy forward. And then let's keep that fingerprint engagement as we slide our left foot straight back and into lunge. Press back into the left heel, ground the left heel, and roll yourself open into warrior two, and just blossom all the way open into the full expression of the shape so that we really keep that width. And then spin the back heel up and come back into crescent. Drop the hands to heart center, and as you do so, we'll step forward, refinding mountain. And then rethink about restabilizing, engage the fingerprints. And then with the fingerprints engaged, we'll step the right foot back. Find our balanced, stable place. And then ground your right heel. And we'll roll open and into warrior two. And think about creating the same width, that same expansiveness we did on the first side. And then coming back into crescent, hands coming to heart center. And as we do that, we'll step to the front of the mat. From that front of the mat space, sweep the arms up and overhead. As the arms sweep up and overhead, give yourself that big reach and extension. And then exhale through forward fold. As you exhale through forward fold, get back into the bottom of the shape. Explore the depth of the shape once again. Think about that full fold mechanism. And then once again, take your half lift and really extend the spine out here. You can even slide the hands up the legs to the thighs or just below the knees and really think about activating the lumbar musculature. And then relax all the way back down. Settle all the way back down into the fold. Really melt into that fold space. Plant your hands and we'll walk our way back into down dog. And from down dog, let's come down to hands and knees, flip the tops of the feet, and glide our way back into the beautiful little landing here. Kind of a quarter class check-in, which I haven't done for a while. Just landing and feeling into the shape you've created, feeling into the breath within that shape that you've created. And let's just see what we can do with the inhale as well as the exhale portion of our breath to make our body just a little bit more at ease in the shape. And then when it feels appropriate, let's slide our fingers forward if they're not already in front of us. We'll pull ourselves forward to tabletop. And from tabletop, let's curl those toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. From down dog, we'll walk our way forward to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. And then from the depth of the fold, drift your awareness to your sacrum. Think about keeping the fold depth as kind of as engaged as it can be as you roll yourself back up. As much fold as is possible throughout the entirety of the unfolding here until eventually pose. Hands come together at heart center. Slide the right foot straight back into lunge. Drop the hands to the mat. And then wiggle that right foot back just a touch more than it already is. And we'll sweep ourselves back up into crescent. A little bit of opening for the front of the right hip. As you get into this top space, lift the chin. See if you can open up the front of the right hip just a little bit more. And then we'll drop our hands to heart center and step back to the front of the mat, or return to the front of the mat. Big inhale breath, nice deep exhale. Hand staying at heart center, left foot slides straight back. Sweep the arms up, full expression of crescent. Really feel the strength in the feet. And then we'll float the hands down to the mat. Slide that left foot back just a little bit deeper into the space. And then sweep yourself up. Full expression of crescent. We get that nice anterior left hip expansion. We'll lift the chin, see if we can capture just a little bit more of that expansion. And then the hands drop to heart center and we'll return to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands and we'll walk back into down dog. From down dog, drop to hands and knees tabletop. And then let's flip the tops of the feet and once again sink into child's pose. So there's this little village. It's on the edge of a river. The other side of the river, there's this dense forest jungle area. And then on the other side of the village, there's this dense mountain region. And this village has really thrived, and the people of this village have really been prosperous, owing a great deal to the river that shares one of their borders, creates one of the borders. Let's give ourselves just 30 more seconds here. When it feels appropriate, fingertips gripping into the mat in front of us, we'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we'll curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. Get all the way back, feel the hips elevate, drive down to the handprints. See if you can get that anterior hip crease that we worked on to help elongate this shape. So pull back at the hip crease and drive the hips through that space you've created. And then let's walk ourselves forward. We'll find our way to the front of the mat in forward fold. And from here, we'll inhale into half lift. And then exhale back into fold. And we'll slide our left foot halfway back, kind of to a half lunge here. So whatever your lunge is, just try to go halfway. And then try to balance the weight between the feet. And then let's come up onto the fingertips.
And you can have knee bends here. You can have legs straight here. It's whatever feels most appropriate for you. Just trying to balance the weight in the feet. That's all we're trying to do. And then relax back. And let's slide our left foot all the way back into lunge. And here we're going to sweep ourselves up into crescent. So we should have some pretty good anterior hip space. Now we've kind of played with that fatigue on the right hamstring, or maybe started to play with the musculature on the right hamstring, edging towards fatigue. Let's bring our hands to heart center so we have a little bit more stability, and then slide back into the right hamstring. So we're trying to straighten that right leg out just a little bit. Doesn't have to go fully straight, but we start to play a little bit more on that hamstring space. As you're doing that, there's a weight distribution shift that happens. A lot of times it's going to be pretty easy to put all the weight in that back foot. See if you can really engineer some balance here. And then rebend that front knee and sweep yourself up into a nice fatigued version of crescent. And then we'll drop the hands down to the mat and step forward into fold. Inhale into half left. Exhale back into fold. A lot more fold available to you. So don't short that. Don't cheat that. Really sink into it. And as you're sinking into that fold, think about how the right and left hamstring are kind of differently activated. And see if you can just breathe some ease into the hamstrings plural. And then when it feels appropriate, let's slide our our right foot straight back, halfway back, and into this half lunge. And then we're going to come up onto the fingertips. And then we're just looking to balance the weight distribution. So knees can be bent if that feels appropriate. The legs can be straight if that feels appropriate. But we want the front and back foot to be holding a relative equal amount of weight. Big strain on that front hamstring. And then we'll bend the knees and slide the right foot all the way back. And sweep ourselves up into crescent. Again, we should have some anterior space, so we have relative freedom there. We're going to bring the hands heart center for some more stability, and then slide back into that left hamstring. Just trying to keep our feet relatively balanced. Weight wants to go all the way into that back foot. See what you can do to stay centered here. A little bit more activation to that front hamstring. And let's rebend the front knee, sweep the arms up crescent, float the hands down on the mat, and we'll step forward. Fold, inhale into half left. Exhale back into fold. Settle into that fold here. Try to use that upper leg musculature or the space you've created in that upper leg musculature to get into more full depth. And then let's plant our hands and we'll walk our way into plank. And from plank, we'll slowly, gently, delicately lower ourselves down to our belly. And from our belly space, let's plant our forehead. So our forehead is actively engaged in the mat. Flex the quads so that the kneecaps lift. And then slide your hands down so that they can be directly underneath your elbows. So lowering the hands down your torso until you feel like they're directly underneath the elbows. And then try to tuck your chin into your sternum and squeeze the scapula together. So looking for a little of that upper back, high posterior chain expansion. Trying to keep the cervical spine pretty neutral, even with the chin tuck, right? So we're not able to bring too much bend because we have the floor there preventing us.
And then just relax. And you can slide your hands underneath your forehead for a little crocodile pose. And so for the most part, this village is just ideally placed. For the most part, the surrounding nature is advantageous. But there are some brief periods during the rainy season where historically there have been floods, and these floods have done significant amounts of damage to the village. And so the village, over the course of time, has developed this technique for an early warning system that notifies them if a flood is coming. And if it is coming, they're able to react, and they try to build up walls and protect the city as much as possible from the rising river. Last 20 seconds here. The system is quite manual. They send out kind of the fastest members of the community. They set them up on these towers, and they just observe the river. They just look up the mountain, and if they see any change in the water flow, they run back to the village. The way they have it set up, they get about an extra 6 hours or so of warning. When you're right, when you're ready. Let's slide our hands back underneath our shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees, tabletop. And from tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way into down dog. Get all the way back into that down dog. Retract that anterior hip space and push into the hands in a way where you can feel the hips shift back and load into that hamstring space. It's really about how much pressure we can create in the hands to get back into that depth. And then let's walk our way forward to the front of the mat. We will inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Settle into your fold space. Drift your awareness from your hamstrings to the calf. So really think about feeling in the fold all the way from the top of the hamstring insertion to the top of the calf insertion and to the bottom of the calf insertion. And then slowly lift your awareness from the bottom of your calf insertion up and just follow the awareness with your head. So you're lifting your head, you're unfolding yourself back into mountain, but with that awareness on the posterior chain. And then eventually we unfold in mountain. Hands come together at heart center. Squeeze into the glutes a little bit here. And let's slide our right foot straight back and into lunge. Take your right hand and place that on your left thigh, and take your left hand and place that on your left hip. And then we're going to roll the left shoulder back into this twist. Right hand here, providing some extra capacity for rotation. Think about softening that shoulder down away from the ears. A lot of posterior chain space. We've done no rotations yet, right? So this is a huge ask of this lateral chain on the right side. And then we'll come back to neutral. Sweep our arms up into crescent. Drop the hands to heart center as we return to the front of the mat. First breath here, slow, fluid, easy.
Eventually, we are going to slide our left foot straight back and into lunge. Establish your stable base first. Then left hand comes to the right hip. Right hand comes to the left hand comes to the right quad. Left hand, right. Geez Louise. Left hand, right quad. Right hand, right hip. There we go. And we're going to turn that right shoulder. You knew what we were doing. I didn't have to explain that. I should have just said side two. Really thinking about this left lateral edge, using that left hand to help you get every little bit of twist available, dropping the shoulders down away from the ears, keeping that stable base. Eventually, we'll return back to neutral, sweep the arms, and then drop the hands as we return to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. And then turn the palms towards one another. So we get the fingers out wide, palms towards one another. Sink your seat back towards chair. And then bring your torso down onto your thighs. Fingertips reach straight out in front of you. And then drop your hands down to the mat. So we have kind of the thighs catching the torso. See if I can make that a little bit better. And then drop your head. Push back through your hamstrings and feel into that fold. So you take yourself kind of backdooring into the depth of this forward fold and really feel the posterior chain respond to that. Really hamstring focused in the posterior chain, right? A lot of times we're upper back or lower back focused. Tonight we've been really hamstring focused. And then inhale into half lift. Hold that half lift, activate the lumbar, drift your hands up to your hips and put your forefingers on the front of the quads and let the thumbs wrap around. And then let's tweak ourselves all the way up into this nice little mountain. And from our mountain, we're going to keep the hands right where they are. So big kind of elbows pointing towards the edges of the room. Slide our left foot straight back into lunge, and then ground our left heel and roll open into a warrior two. Okay, so right foot pointed straight towards the front of your room. Left foot can be pointed towards the side or angled more towards 45 degrees. And then we're just going to pour this little tea kettle out. And don't need to straighten the front leg, right? This is more of a choice between a side angle and a triangle. So this can be either one, whatever feels appropriate for you. And then we'll lift ourselves back up. Let's just take the full version of warrior two. And then left heel spins up or into crescent. Drop the hands to heart center and we'll return to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale to half lift. Create that half lift, then slide your hands up, forefingers to the thighs, thumbs wrapping around. We'll tweak ourselves all the way up. Hands stay on the hips, big wide elbow space. Right foot slides straight back. Right heel grounds. We find this version of warrior two. Make sure your left foot is pointed straight forward. And then tilt forward like you're pouring out a little tea kettle. Remember, this can be triangle, but it doesn't have to be. It's just about activation in that hamstring. And either way, we're going to get it. And then we'll draw ourselves back up. Blossom into warrior two. Right heel spins up. We're into crescent. Drop the hands to heart center as we step to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. And exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let the hamstrings completely settle. And let's take our seat down to our heels, and then we'll extend our legs out in front of us. So headed down a little bit early. Gonna use some of this hamstring space now to access a little lumbar. But we're also going to fatigue the hamstrings just a little bit more than normal. So I'd say they're probably already fatigued a little more than normal. We're going to fatigue them a little bit extra. We're going to flex the quads. So maybe even toes up, but less about where the toes are pointing and more about activation in this upper leg musculature. Really think about the quads being flexed, and then take yourself forward into a fold. And as you get into that fold, the quad flex makes the fold more restricted. We are going to flex in and out of the quad musculature. So finding a fold and then relax the quads. And then bring the flex back into the quads. So think about squeezing into that upper leg musculature. And then relax the quads. And then squeeze into that upper leg musculature, activating the quads. And then relax. And then squeeze. And relax. And squeeze. And relax. Feel into the depth you created in this forward fold. And we're going to hang out here for 60 more seconds, which is a very long amount of time for us to be in this forward fold. See if you can just slow down your breath. We really did warm up the entirety of class for this opportunity to take this seated forward fold. And we're already halfway through our time, so these 60 seconds blow by. And as it feels appropriate, let's walk ourselves back up into seat. I had a little bit more planned, but I think we have to get on our back and appreciate what we've done after that. Really feel into how much low back activation you were able to capture. Remember, knees can bend here to help neutralize the lumbar. But if having the legs extended feels better for you, that is also an option. We're going to take a little bit of an extended time just to settle all of that fold in. So give yourself about 90 seconds here. Just really appreciating that, because that was a huge adjustment for the spine. And we used all of that hamstring space that we just built upon and built upon and built upon throughout the duration of class. So in order to get this huge head start, one of the things that this village has adapted to or created is they take their most athletic, most gifted individuals and they put them in the watch, because they're able to relay the information back to the village faster, because they're able to run faster, and that's how they're transmitting information. And so on this particular day, there's a pretty heightened awareness around the possibility of flooding. And so they have their fastest villager in the tower. She's this young woman who would essentially rather be doing anything other than being seated in this tower. And yet, because she is who she is, that's where she finds herself on this day. And she's been watching this river just flow by her aimlessly for hours. And it is just melting her brain to be this bored. And she starts to find herself drifting off into this daydream. Last about 15 seconds here. All right, when it feels ready, when you feel ready, let's bend our knees and let the kneecaps point towards the ceiling. Let your arms fall cactus and let the knees just start to explore the space you've created. Although we only did the one twist, the twist that we did do is a very deep twist. So as you're moving here, see if you can feel in to that capacity. Same time, we did a lot of kind of vertical lengthening of the spinal column. Obviously, the spinal column is now horizontal, but in our upright space, we'll see what you can kind of encounter in that length as well. And then eventually we're going to bring our knees back to neutral and we're going to walk the feet out to the width of the mat and let the knees fall in towards one another. And we're looking here to just relax the lumbar, to just allow the lumbar to feel into the length we've given it. And then just allow your body to be at ease. So this young woman is kind of startled out of her daydream by a real life nightmare. As her eyes kind of focus back on the reality that is around her, she sees water rushing by. And she hears trees collapsing under the new weight of this flash flood. And while she should have seen this way up the mountain, she's missed it in her daydream. And now the flood is not only past her guard tower booth, it is rapidly moving towards the village. And she jumps down and she starts sprinting towards the village, screaming as loud as she can, trying to alert them with as much of a heads up as might be possible. But very quickly, she recognizes that every single step she's taking, no matter how fast she is, she's not as fast as this water is moving. And this wall of water is rushing towards her village.
where it's going to impact them without any warning at all. And still she's running as fast and as hard as she can, but as the water gets further and further ahead of her, this crushing weight of the failure to notify her community is starting to set in. And she starts thinking about having to face the people of her community. And she stops running. And she walks over a bridge. She crosses the river and she just starts walking aimlessly out into this jungle forest area. We're going to give ourselves 60 more seconds here, just allowing that lumbar to really receive what you've done. All the length, all that expansion, all those rotations in the terms of those big deep twists, and then our cycles of knee movement. Just integrating that here into your spine while it lies against the neutrality of your mat for 20 more seconds. And eventually, let's bring our knees out to the width of the mat so that they are matching the placement of the feet, and then walk our feet and our knees back in line with our hips. And let's bring the feet all the way together. Bottoms of the feet come together. Knees fall out wide. And as she's walking out into the jungle, she can start to hear as the water starts to flood over the banks of her village. And she hears the villagers shouting as they try to make whatever preparations they can for this flood. And she keeps walking further and further away until she can no longer hear their screams. And although she should be alone in this forest now, she has this sensation that she's being watched, that she's being followed. She keeps hearing things and she turns and looks. You never see anything there. Last 15 seconds here. When it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees back to neutral and pull the thighs in towards the torso. Let your hands clasp either the hamstrings, the edge, or the shins. And give yourself a little lateral rock here, like you're trying to play with the sacrum just a touch. And then eventually we'll release the feet back down to the mat. And extend your arms overhead towards the wall behind you, not towards the ceiling. Palms up. Splay out the fingers nice and wide. And then lift up into a nice little neutral bridge so that we're not going up into extension, but just a nice neutral spine. And then we'll relax back down to the mat. And as you settle back down into the mat here, just ask yourself if there's anything that your body might want or need before Shavasana. If there is, offer that to yourself. And if you're ready for some stillness, let's just settle right into that stillness. And so as she's walking in this forest, hearing these sounds, she's comes to a point where she's certain there's someone behind her. And she slowly stops, whips her head around, and as she's looking behind her over her shoulder, she hears a stick snap in front of her. And she whips her head back around, and no more than 2 feet in front of her is this old man with this white painted face, this witch doctor. And he reaches out and he grabs her hand and he says, "What are you running from?" And then before she knows it, he whisks her away, just pulling her by the wrist deeper into the forest. Just letting your body come to complete and full stillness here. Before she knows what's happening, she's pulled in front of this fire. And this medicine man sits her down and says, I know the reason you're scared. And he starts telling the story of this monster that lives in this forest. This monster that, if it sees you, will pursue you. And if it pursues you and you run, will become bigger, more horrendous, more terrifying. The faster you run, the more you run from it, the bigger, more horrendous, more terrifying it gets. And this medicine man is telling this story in this very hiss-like voice. And as he's telling it, this young girl is getting more and more scared of the forest she's in. She's looking around. And eventually just says, enough, enough. How do I defeat it? And medicine man kind of laughs. And he says, to defeat this particular monster, you'll need to turn and face it. Because when you do, it will slowly lose its power. And almost before the sentence is over, she knows what she has to do. She gets up, she excuses herself, and she makes her way back to her village where she can help with the problem she's created. We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes. Up into our wrists, our ankles, knees, elbows, shoulders, hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, the entirety of the body will move. And with that movement, we'll transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. Realigning your spine, refinding your breath, letting your eyes close. And with your next inhale, let's bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that only the problems you run from can chase you? And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Oh, happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Have a beautiful rest of your week. I will be back on Sunday for a little bit of a recharge. And I hope I see you then. Love the heck out of you. Mwah.